Good morning, Tuscaloosa. Ooh, it's not afternoon like normal, but good morning, Tuscaloosa, West Alabama, Internet world, everywhere that you're watching the Joe Gaither show right here on BamaCentral, BamaCentral.com. Hope you're having a great Thursday. Hope it's going to be a great Thursday for you guys. I appreciate everybody watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. You listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. We're a proud part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network, along with our friends Blue Collar Unplugged, who just dropped their latest episode. Blake Byler, Matthew Gibson, and Jacob Pickle. Make sure you check out Blue Collar Unplugged. Those guys had Seth Greenberg, ESPN Seth Greenberg, on their program this week. So he's going to be talking about college game day, the secret scrimmage against TCU and Wake Forest and all that stuff. So make sure you check out Blue Collar Unplugged for their second episode of the basketball season, as they dropped that this morning. But we're not here to talk about basketball. It's LSU Alabama week, and we're going to have a lot of fun. We talked to Matt Moscona yesterday of ESPN 104.5. We're going to go back to ESPN 104.5 down in Baton Rouge and welcome our guest on today is Hunt Palmer. You can follow Hunt Palmer at Hunt Palmer 88 on the X machine. Listen to him on the Hunt Palmer Show 1 to 3 on ESPN 104.5 down in Baton Rouge. He's also on the LSU pre- and post-game show, so there's no better person. Matt was good, but Hunter's better. There's no better person to find out about LSU than Hunt Palmer. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Doing well, Joe. How are you on this important week?
Absolutely. I'm doing great. I'm excited. I cannot wait for Saturday night, really. And this is one of my last steps to get there to Saturday night. So I'm really pumped up about it. It's a huge week. So let me just throw the ball into your court. We started the episode yesterday with Matt Moscona with the Florida State loss and kind of the progression. And so I want to start there, and then we're going to go in a lot of different directions than we went yesterday. LSU lost to Florida State in the first week. 45-24. I think there was a lot of excitement about this LSU team going into the season. And so I want to know kind of how that changed with the loss, but more importantly about the team, how the team has grown or changed since the opening week loss.
Yeah, weird game. LSU busts a huge one on the first play of the game, way down into the red zone, and they really moved the ball very, very well in the first half of that game, 300 yards plus of offense. But they got stopped on a couple of fourth downs, got stuffed on a run, had a sack, and didn't cash in the red zone, but still got to the half in great position. And quite frankly, they just got whipped in the second half. You had an unfortunate turnover where Malik Neighbors fell down and Jaden Daniels threw an out route, and you get an interception there. And the defense didn't get any stops. They couldn't cover Keon Coleman, couldn't cover Johnny Wilson, and that has continued, and the moving of the ball has continued. So those two themes have gone and carried on for 2 months, but just not cashing in early didn't allow LSU to build a lead, and then Florida State just ran away from them in the second half. And look, Florida State's a good team, but that's the worst half that LSU's played all year.
Well, you're playing obviously everybody's focused on LSU and Alabama this week, and a lot of the people from the Alabama side have thought, oh, well, Alabama will be able to get a couple stops, and their defense stinks. I've been really worried about Alabama's consistency on offense, being able to, I know LSU's defense is 88th in the country and 88th in passing defense, but the consistency up front for Alabama, the offensive line, giving up a lot of pressures. I know Mekhi Wingo is out for this game, and he's out for the next, 5-6 weeks or so, according to Brian Kelly on Monday. But you've got Jordan Jefferson, and you still got Mason Smith up front. How is the LSU front, even with the struggles on the back end, been able to stop the run, been able to pressure quarterbacks throughout the season?
Not great consistently. Against Auburn, they did a pretty good job. Auburn scored 18 points, but Auburn's offense is atrocious. They went out to Cal and scored 14. They went to, I believe, Kyle Field and scored 3 on offense. I mean, they're terrible on offense. Awful. And statistic and Army's awful too. They had their backup quarterback. They didn't score on Troy the week before and they came. So the last 2 games LSU's played have looked pretty good statistically. I'm not going to put much stock into either one of them. LSU's the strength of the defense is in the front, but I just don't know how strong that is, especially without Mekhi Wingo. Mekhi Wingo was a freshman All-SEC player at Missouri, was a third-team honorable mention All-American last year at LSU, and hasn't played that way this year because he's been hurt. So it's not as if you're taking some guy who's been an X factor for LSU out of the lineup in this game. He could be, but he's been hurt. So they've got some depth at defensive tackle. They've still got Jacoby and Gilroy, who's an older player who can help them out there. Jalen Lee's a senior who's played some for Florida. Those two guys will back up Jordan Jefferson and Mason Smith. LSU better do a pretty good job at the line of scrimmage, because if they don't, Bama's going to score 40 points, and they may anyway. But that's where LSU has to try to affect the game.
With the focus on the front, what do you see with Harold Perkins yesterday? How has his season gone? I know he started kind of off the off ball. He's kind of moved to the kind of this slot kind of spot, more the edges. Coach Saban yesterday in his press conference talked about, he was asked about simulating Harold Perkins, and he kind of equipped back. He's like, well, if we had anybody that could simulate Harold Perkins, he wouldn't be on our scout team. So what's his progression been like this season?
He's been good. I think everyone expects him to do what he did against Arkansas last year every week. That's not really that realistic. He just absolutely dominated that game in the second half and basically won it by himself. LSU couldn't score that day. It was cold. Jaden Daniels was sick and hadn't practiced, and they couldn't score, and Perkins forced 2 turnovers and had 3 sacks. It was ridiculous. He can't do that every week, but he has rushed the passer and made some plays, and they'll ask him to do that in this game. I think his advantage there is that the 2 tackles for Bama are so big that he's got such an athletic advantage over them. If they get their hands on him, they're going to knock him. They're going to knock him into the ground. They got 120 pounds on him. But if he gets by him, then he can make some plays in the backfield there, where Milrose sometimes will hold the ball a little bit too long.
Yeah.
But they're also going to use him to do some spying. He did that very well last year against Bryce Young. He did that at times this year against Jordan Travis. So they're going to vary what they do with Harold Perkins. And I think what's key is that you create down and distances that allow Harold Perkins to do different things. If Alabama's in 2nd and 2 all day, Harold Perkins can't help you on 2nd and 2. He can help you on 3rd and 9. He can help you on 3rd and 8. He can spy Milroe and not let him run for 7. He's probably one of the only linebackers in the league that can actually run with Milroe, and he can create pressure off the edge. He's a really dynamic playmaker. He hasn't been what he was that day in Fayetteville, day in and day out, but he's still got every bit of that ability.
Well, Alabama's had a lot of trouble staying on schedule. When Alabama has stayed on schedule, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, the offense is, every offense looks great when you stay on schedule, but Alabama's had a lot of trouble this year not getting into 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, something like that. So that's going to be, I think people are overlooking the Alabama inconsistencies on offense just a little bit. Let's keep going with this side of the football. Defensive coordinator Matt House is in his 2nd year. And so everybody's seeing the struggles with this year for Alabama. Is it more on schematics or is it more on personnel? Obviously, you've seen the kind of issues in the back end with the secondary. You lost Zy Alexander. You've lost your transfers. Denver Harris and Chestnut are kind of suspended / off the team. Basically, your whole secondary has been decimated. But is it personnel more? Would you say it's more personnel driven for the struggles, or is it schematically driven?
I think it's personnel. I've been going out to LSU football practices for 13 years now, and I'm used to seeing first-round draft picks in the secondary every single year. Same thing in Tuscaloosa, right. Same thing in Gainesville, same thing in Columbus, Ohio, and they just don't have them. They just don't have those type of players. And now the guys who were veterans in that group, Deuce Chestnut's a 3rd-year player, Zy Alexander's a 5th-year player, Denver Harris is a 2nd-year player. Those guys are out of the equation. Greg Brooks, unfortunately, dealing with brain cancer after the 2nd week of the season. That's a 5th-year player, and you've lost all your experience, and there wasn't a ton of top-end talent to begin with. So they've got some guys who are fairly highly recruited who haven't played very much football, but those are the guys that are kind of out there. And it's just they were not totally out of position against Florida State. You could argue that they didn't do a good job with Harold Perkins against Florida State. They didn't rush him very much. He dropped into coverage a ton, and I can get on board with that in terms of X's and O's. But they just couldn't cover Keon Coleman because he's going to be the 23rd pick in the draft.
Yeah, he's
and
incredible.
They don't have anybody like that at corner. And then against Ole Miss, they couldn't stop the run or the pass. I don't know what you call when you can't cover guys on the outside and your defensive line is getting knocked off the ball. Now, they brought in Pete Jenkins. And look, I'm not a huge X's and O's guy. I can give you the statistics and trends and an opinion. I didn't play college football or certainly don't coach it. But they made what seems to me be a pretty simple fix to the defensive front when Pete Jenkins came in a few weeks ago. They just moved the defensive lineman like 6 a yard-ish closer to the line of scrimmage, where against Ole Miss, you were taking still shots, and they were 2 yards off the ball, which was that seems ridiculous to me. But
Yes.
it's on tape. You can't really refute it. They've put a little pressure on offensive lines. They still don't have Glenn Dorsey or Michael Brockers, or they just don't have that guy. But they've been a little bit better the last 2 weeks. We'll see. I think we'll have a really good idea of what the rest of the schedule is going to look like on Saturday. If LSU gives up 45 points to Alabama, you'll go, okay, well, they got some stops against Auburn and Army, but even Arkansas, the worst offense in the league, carved them up, and Florida State carved them up, and Ole Miss carved them up, Missouri carved them up. If you have a pulse on offense, you'll carve them up. If they get some stops against this offense, you go, well, maybe they're getting a little bit better. I mean, we'll just see on Saturday.
Well, you've been covering LSU football, and you're down there on ESPN 104.5. Listen to him 1 to 3, the Hunt Palmer Show. What are some of your favorite memories or takeaways from this LSU Alabama rivalry? I know maybe the last 10 years it's been a lot of close games, but Alabama's won a lot of them. Obviously, you got the 2019 win. You've got wins in 2011 there as well. The 9-6 game. What's been some of your favorite, and last year, what's been some of your favorite memories of this LSU Alabama game?
I'll say this for the folks that pull for the Tide. I have never in my life been in a stadium with as much pregame electricity as the 2011 game in Tuscaloosa, ever. From the ridiculous amount of celebrities on the sideline, that place was absolutely full. 45 minutes to an hour before kickoff. I've never seen that. I've seen Tiger Stadium at its absolute best, and it's fantastic. And it was great the next year in 2012 until the Yeldon screen pass, and it's phenomenal. But that was undefeated on undefeated. It was 1 versus 2. It was as big as it can get at that point in the schedule, and I was on the field for overtime because I was writing at the time and I was in the press box. So that was an unbelievable memory that I have. On the flip side, like I said, that next year was the same type of environment. It was a revenge spot for LSU, but the Tigers had already lost. So it wasn't quite the same, but they played so well in the second half. And then to have McCarron and Yeldon rip the heart out at the end was tough. I'll tell you, I go obviously to every home game because I do the pre and post game for radio, but we don't travel to road games, but I'm obviously at all the home games. I did not go to LSU in Alabama last year. My cousin got married. So I was in New Orleans I was watching the game in the church on my phone. And then at the reception, I was watching it on the TV down at the reception venue, and LSU wins in overtime. And I went back up to the dance floor and I got another beverage, and my aunt came up, and her daughter had gotten married, and she was like, "I'm so sorry you weren't there." And I was like, "Aunt Nancy, we won. I'm good. Like the bar's open. Thank you very much." So just a little bit of a different memory from that perspective. But yeah, this has been the most important game on the schedule for 15 years. And people, especially in the Les Miles era in Baton Rouge, criticized the program for building this game up too much. And then if you lost, you might lose to Arkansas the next week because you felt like the win was out of your sails or the team played tight. And I want to go, you know what? Like at LSU, if you're going to accomplish any of your goals in this format where there's a 4-team playoff or a 2-team BCS and you're in the division with them, you have to win the game. The kids aren't stupid. Game day's coming. CBS picks is the only primetime game. You're talking to Kirk Herbstreit on Thursday. Like, they're not dumb. Like, it is a really big deal. And I laughed when A&M in 2020 said, "Hey, we should be in the playoff." I'm like, no. If you're in the SEC West, which you decided to come join, and you don't beat Alabama, which you lost by 20 that year, you don't get to do anything else. Like that, go have fun somewhere else. You're not playing for a championship. So it's a big deal. It's a huge game. I don't know what the future of it is in terms of how the scheduling sets up, but it's been something for the last 15 years.
It's been a blast. I can think back. I was a student still at Alabama during the 2011 game, and I had more money, more cash in my pocket than I have had in a long, long time, and I could not get anyone to look my way for one ticket. I was elbow to elbow on the quad, and I was just like, anybody, one ticket. And they're like, "Well, how much you got?" And no. And it was just crazy. I ended up watching the game on the couch and just like, oh my gosh. I mean, every year. And I worked at a restaurant that year, and Alex Rodriguez came to our restaurant. It was just like insanity.
And that game was different. It gets a lot of hate from a lot of people outside the South. But like, even if you look at that game compared to 2019, I know LSU won both, but Bama's kind of run away from LSU a few times. You could even go to 2012 or whatever. But in the 11 game, the intensity was such that you thought if anyone scored a touchdown, like it was probably over. And that the intensity that goes in there in 19, like if the other team scored, like, well, we get the ball back. Let's go score again. So that made the intensity feel so much different in that game. Like every 3 yards you got felt like a massive win. And so that it was just a game. I don't have anything to compare that game to in terms of the intensity level of it. Unfortunately, Oklahoma State couldn't help LSU out and beat Iowa State so that LSU could win by 30 in the Superdome and celebrate the greatest team ever. But unfortunately, had to see the Tide again there in New Orleans, and that was not a lot of fun.
Yeah, that ended up a little bit different, but you're right. Every 6 inches seemed like a mile, and it was just that was such a great memory. I mean, even on the losing end, it was such a great memory. Let's talk about Brian Kelly because you alluded to the personnel kind of problems. Brian Kelly in his second year, how has Brian Kelly endeared himself to LSU faithful?
Fine. It doesn't matter if you fake an accent, which I don't know that he did. He just slurred a word. It doesn't matter if what only matters if you win. That's the only thing that matters down here. And so we've had. I mean, if you look at the most successful coaches in LSU history, I mean, Dale Brown went to 2 Final Fours and was beloved here. He was from Minnesota and came down here and coached. You look, Skip Bertman was a Jewish man from Miami, South Florida, comes into the heart of Catholic country in South Louisiana, and he's now revered. There was no fit there. I mean, Les Miles was a quirky guy from the Midwest who for a long time was super endeared here. You don't have to sound like Ed Ogeron to be endearing to people. You have to win games, and you can be from down the bayou. And if you go 5-5 and 500, then you're run out of town. So people around here like Jay Johnson a whole heck of a lot, and he's spent his entire life on the West Coast, and now he's a national champion baseball coach. So I think the approval rating to this point is pretty good. There's a little bit of concern with the in-state recruiting. They've just lost the top-end guys to A&M and Texas, and that's been a little bit of a concern. And people, obviously weren't super pumped when you go to Oxford and get it basically embarrassed because you can't get one stop against Ole Miss. And look, I'll tell you this, on Saturday night at 11:30, people will have wildly different opinions than they do right this very second, because that just matters so much how you perform in that game. So right now the approval ratings are pretty good. It's still fairly early. And I think that he's not going anywhere. He's got a long-term contract and he's going to get that money. So I think that LSU hired a good coach. I felt when they hired him that there would probably be a lot of 9-3s and 10-2s. I just felt like that was kind of where he would settle the program in, and hopefully you pop a good one here and there, and that'd be fantastic. And that kind of feels like the trajectory they're on. 9-3 last year, and it kind of feels like 9-3 this year. But it's I think folks are generally okay with the way things are going.
Well, how did obviously this is a dumb question, but I just want to get your comments on it anyways. How did obviously you go for 2 at the end of the game last year. You beat Alabama and you win the SEC West. Going into that game, I guess, and then after the game, how did that change? I guess did that really solidify? Oh, we made a good hire. Oh, this is the guy. He beat Alabama. Oh, he got us over the hump. First year SEC West. Kind of. How did last year's game kind of seal the deal, I guess, that you made a solid hire?
It's never sealed. I guess, yes, Steve Bertman sealed it, but I mean, it's never truly sealed. I'll tell you this story. This is funny. And basically what you're saying is the general consensus that, oh man, we're really going in the right direction here.
Right.
My dad almost invests more time hating teams than he does loving his own. He hates Notre Dame with a passion. He hates Alabama with a passion. He hates Florida, hates A&M. He hates Louisiana Tech because his friends give him crap. That's how he's wired sports wise. Like he watches all these he hates the Saints. He's a North Louisiana guy, despises the Saints. And so that's how, and he's hated Brian Kelly and Notre Dame for a better part of a decade, just despised the man. And then LSU hires him. And so he's just, this guy stinks. This is a terrible hire. I hate this guy. We're at that wedding last year, and LSU beats Alabama. And he'd had a few cocktails, but he looked at me. He's like, I think we might have the guy. So that's exactly what you're talking about. And then 2 weeks later, or 4 weeks later, they go to College Station and play pathetic football against a terrible football team and lose, and everyone flips. And that's the nature of sports fans. There's just never never an even keel, which is why I mean I'm pretty much always on an even keel, so I'm just kind of willing to see how things go. But yeah, I mean, you beat Alabama the second year in a row, people will want to throw a parade. Then you turn around and get beat at home by Florida or A&M, they'll be ticked again. So it just is what it is.
We've been talking to Hunt Palmer right here on the Joe Gaither Show. You can follow him at Hunt Palmer 88 and listen to him on ESPN 104.5 down in Baton Rouge from 1 to 3 and on the LSU pre and post game show for the LSU Sports Radio Network. Let's flip to the LSU offensive side of football. Number one offense in the country, best quarterback in the country, skill positions out the wazoo. What makes this? Is it all Jaden Daniels and his magic, or is it the skill position guys as well, like the bevy of skill position guys? Is it just the perfect combination? I mean, if you didn't have 2019 LSU, where would this LSU football team be as far as offensive football?
This would be the best ever if it wasn't for 19. This has been amazing. Now, here's the caveat that I've tossed out a couple of times, and people aren't wild about it, but I can. And it's been amazing to watch. It was amazing to watch them go up and down the field against Ole Miss, up and down the field against Missouri, did it against Arkansas, did it against up against Auburn. I mean, they've been unstoppable basically, but they didn't do much in the second half against Florida State, who's got a first-round pick at defensive end in Jared Verse. They've got pro corners. They're a good defense, and I can envision a world where I sit down and open my mic for post game on Saturday, and LSU has scored 24 points total and gotten beaten 38-24. And I go, okay, well, yeah, you lit it up against Ole Miss, and you lit it up against Missouri, and you lit it up against Auburn and Arkansas, and you lit it up against Army and Grambling, but you didn't light it up against Alabama or Florida State, and those are the good defenses. So what does that say? My gut tells me LSU's going to score a bunch of points on Saturday because that's what I think this offense is going to do. But the world exists where, excuse me, like they have beat up on some defenses without the talent that Alabama has, and A&M's kind of got that on the front end. Their corners aren't very good, but they do on the defensive front. So we'll see.
Yeah, so I've been watching a lot of LSU this week just to kind of get ready for the game, and I just see just options galore. And so I think, okay, well, Kool-Aid, if he takes away one of them, if he takes away Malik Neighbors or if he takes away Brian Thomas, whoever he's matched up against for a particular snap. And, Terrion Arnold, he played pretty good cornerback. Okay, maybe he goes 50-50 with his other matchup or whatever. Well, you've still got Kyron Lacey. You've still got Aaron Anderson. You've still got Logan Diggs and Mason Taylor. You've still got all these other options. And so I asked Coach Saban last night about just the different options and how many one-on-one matchups there's going to be. And Coach went on a diatribe about winning your box and playing the next play, this, that, and the other. I think you're going to have a lot of if LSU can find, okay, this guy's not up to snuff, this guy's not really, I think they have the options to score on whoever. Like, okay, well, we won't throw at Kool-Aid, we won't throw at Terrion Arnold, but we will hammer this matchup to Mason Taylor over and over and over again because you don't have anybody who can match up with him. Tell me about Mason Taylor. Tell me about Kyron Lacey. And really, I guess we'll say other comments. Aaron Anderson, Coach Saban's, I think, he was so brokenhearted to lose Aaron Anderson. I think he used to call him, little Aaron Anderson. What's he? I know he's been kind of like that third, fourth, fifth option, but what's he really been for this offense? Everybody knows Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Let's talk about the other three, four guys that I think will really impact this game.
Yeah, Kyron Lacey had a huge drop in the Florida State game. It was a third down. He was wide open on a post route, and the ball hit him right in the waist, and he didn't catch it. And that was a big problem for him last year. He's got a big frame. He's 6'2", 6'3", and he's an older player. He's a fourth-year player. He's got some real skills. Drops were an issue last year. He's kind of cleaned that up. He had a huge game 3-4 weeks ago. I can't even remember the opponent, but I think he had 2 or 3 touchdowns in that game as the third option. And he's a good third option. He's not Terrace Marshall from 2019, who was a top 2-round pick and has been playing in the league with the Panthers. But he's a solid third option. Aaron Anderson has not been much of a factor. Right. He muffed a punt in the first game and has not looked super explosive like he was in high school. We all obviously know he's had that injury, and I don't know how healthy he is or what the situation is, but he just hasn't been used very much. But Mason Taylor certainly is used. And what you'll see from Mason Taylor, I heard Nick Saban describing this, I think it was the teleconference yesterday. LSU runs a play 4, 5, 6 times a game where they do a read option where it's a potential give to Logan Diggs, and then Daniels will run around the left side, and he can either keep it or he can dump it off in the flat to Mason Taylor, and they get 8 to 12 yards almost every time they run it. It's amazing. It's a triple option is what it is. And that's the play that Taylor is the most involved in. And he's he's a solid option. He's not, OJ Howard or one of those just freak tight ends that's going to play in the NFL for a million years, but he's big. He catches the ball well. He blocks pretty well, and he's very capable on third down. So you won't see him bust a 65-yarder, but he's just that's what Neighbors and Thomas are for. He's just real solid around the first down markers.
Well, the LSU offensive line, I guess that really where it's going to all kind of hinge on. How is LSU? I think I just saw is 71st in sacks allowed, so they only allowed like 2 sacks a game or so. Is that what I saw? Yeah. Tied 71st. So allowed 80 sack yards, 17 sacks this season. So Alabama, you kind of outlined it right at the beginning with the Florida State comparison and Jared Verse. Obviously, you've got Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell off the edges, and you've got some good players on the inside. Not maybe not great players, but what do you think? How do you think that LSU's offensive line is going to be able to hold up with Jaden? I mean, Jaden Daniels crushed Alabama, escaping the pocket and scrambling after the pass plays. How do you think the LSU offensive line is going to hold up?
I think they'll do well. They have been very, very good since the Florida State game. Now, that goes back to the point we're making, so we'll see. But Will Campbell at left tackle was the most talented left tackle they have had since La'el Collins, who has played for a long time in the NFL, and then before that, probably Andrew Whitworth. He's exceptional. I'd never seen this before covering LSU. He was an early enrollee in January, and like 6 practices into the spring, Brian Kelly said, that's our left tackle, and never moved him after that. That doesn't happen very often. Now, it's happened in Tuscaloosa there with Jaden Proctor, but it's rare. And he took his lumps last year and has been fantastic this year. Emory Jones is on the other side at tackle. He's in the same class as Campbell, and those two guys have been very, very good. And then LSU's just very old in the middle. Charles Turner is a senior. Miles Frazier is a senior. And Garrett Dellinger is a fourth-year player. So they're really talented on the edges. They're very old in the middle. And if those guys play well, I'm just not sure anyone can stop LSU. I just don't, with the decision-making that Daniels has and the accuracy he's shown through 8 weeks, the only way you're going to stop LSU is if you just blow that thing up. And so we'll see. I'm sure Alabama's going to try that on Saturday. If they do, I think they've got a real chance to do what Florida State did. If they don't, I think LSU is going to put up a lot of points.
Oh man, so we could be either playing a rematch or a repeat of the LSU Ole Miss game. I guess best case scenario for
LSU would be fine with that. LSU is just fine in a track in the field. The thing that we've been talking about down here, honestly, Joe, is it's just a lot. And I don't know if the guys feel like this. I certainly do analyzing the game. I don't know what the players or coaches feel like, but it feels like sitting here on Thursday morning that when LSU's offense takes the field for the first time in Bryant-Denny at 6:45 on Saturday, you got to go score 40. There's 100,000 here. There's pros all over the defense, and you got to go score 40. Like, that is a hard way to play. It's like third down, you're like, oh my God, if we punt here, they're going to go right down and score. Like, that's how I feel. I'm sure the players don't feel that way, but that's what it feels like analyzing the game, and that's just a hard way to show up to work on Saturday.
Well, you've obviously watched Alabama in your prep work this week and just watching them. Do you not feel or do you not take any solace in the fact that Alabama started slow offensively pretty much every game? You went almost 3 and out 3 straight times against Arkansas on the third down, 3rd and 9 or whatever. Jalen Milroe hits the 79-yard pass, and everybody in Bryant-Denny Stadium breathes again. Against Tennessee, you went 3 and out like pretty much until halftime. And so they've started slowly. You've had problems on the offensive line. Then they go into halftime. I guess Tommy Rees and everybody, Eric Wolford, they put it up on the screen and they say, here's what they're actually doing. And the second half kind of goes a lot better. I'm worried about that first half if Alabama's offense cannot start quickly, cannot take advantage of the defense, the defensive problems that LSU has. Cannot, I mean, even if it's, hey, we're just running the football. Let's run the football and be consistent. I'm worried just the offensive line's inconsistencies in the first half will put Alabama in a big hole, and that's not really where they want to be with this LSU offense.
So my answer to that, and everything I say is on tape, so it's easy to go back on YouTube or wherever and find it. I was not super impressed with Milroe last year in reserve duty. I was not super impressed with him at all against Texas. Then I realized that maybe the staff in Tuscaloosa wasn't impressed with much as what they did in South Florida.
Yeah.
And then when he threw that red zone interception against Ole Miss on that pass to the left side, I said this on the air the next Monday. I said, I think Alabama has the worst quarterback in the SEC. I was like, I don't know what Ken Seals does at Vanderbilt because I don't spend much time watching them, but I think he's the worst one. And then you see the next few weeks, and then you see the deep ball, and yeah, he holds on to it too long. And yeah, is he great on 3rd and 7? No, he's not. He's not anywhere close to Bryce Young or Tua or Mac or those guys. He's gotten better. Yeah. And I think LSU, because they're limited in terms of talent and depth, and then the secondary is what it is, I think they're going to play it so safe back there that Alabama will be able to run it and be methodical and just don't do anything crazy, take what's in front of them. And I think they'll score. There's too much scar tissue for me watching this defense the first 6 weeks of the season. I can't put any stock into Auburn or Army. So sure. Do I hope Jalen Milroe throws one of those awful red zone passes like he did against Ole Miss or holds it too long and Perkins gets back there for a strip sack? Like, yeah. Do I think Alabama is going to comfortably score 30, 34 points in this game? Yeah.
Well, I got a commenter chiming in wants to go back to the defense of the secondary players. Obviously, Zy Alexander is hurt, and we hit on Denver Harris and Chestnut not playing. So who are going to be their replacements? Sage Ryan has kind of moved to safety down to corner, and he's been doing that. So it's not like a what this week thing. What's the cornerback defensive back plan? You hit that there's not really first rounders out there. Who is going to be out there?
So Sage Ryan will play one of the corners. He's been a safety for 2 years. He looks like a corner, but he doesn't cover like one, which is why he plays safety. Now he's got to go out there and play corner. He's struggled in coverage for a couple of years after being a 5-star out of the Lafayette area. The other corner is probably going to be Ashton Stamps, who was, if you looked at this class on signing day, probably the lowest rated defensive back in the class. But he got to campus. They loved him at camp first, which is why they offered him. And he looks the part. He is really athletic, and he's not a skinny little freshman, but he just hasn't played very much. And he was, a 3-star recruit that came in. He went to Rummel, which is what produced Jamar Chase and produced Christian Fulton, the cornerback. Like, it's a great football program. But he's going to play one of the other sides. LaTerrence Welsh, who was probably the lowest-rated corner in the class before him, that's a second-year player, will play the other corner spot when you're talking about 3 of them. And then in the secondary, you're going to have Major Burns back at safety, who's a veteran player, but a little stiff, talks a lot of trash, and will come up and hit you. But it's not a guy you want running with Jermaine Burton all that often. And so that's kind of what you're looking at is the majority of the guys that'll do the covering for LSU. It's a unit that just doesn't have much experience at cornerback, and then is a little limited physically at safety.
All right, so I'll be remiss if I got out of here without a Jay Bramlett question. Jay Bramlett, Tuscaloosa native.
I know his father. I had no idea.
Really?
Notre Dame. I didn't know.
Okay, yeah. So he went to Hillcrest High School, about 4 miles away from where I'm recording right now. His father was defensive coordinator at Hillcrest, and now his father is head coach at Brookwood High School, which is about 15 miles away from where I am now. So their family love Coach Bramlett a lot. Obviously spent a lot of time at Notre Dame, graduate transferred to LSU. When he was graduate transfer in that portal era, a lot of people were, hey, let's bring him back to Tuscaloosa. But we had James Burnap going from his first to second year. And a lot of people were kind of, James Burnap, his first year was not good. It was okay. It was his first year, not good. Let's get Jay Bramlett. He didn't really get the opportunity, and so he went to LSU. Any good Jay Bramlett stories? I mean, he's got a got a bomb in his foot. So I think he's a pretty dang good punter. Any good Jay Bramlett stories you got over the last 2 years?
So he has been awesome. I did a special teams segment on my show last week. Don't hold me to this, but I believe LSU has only had one punt returned all year for 2 yards. I think that's it. And he's averaging about 43, 44 a kick. So he's hitting it high, and they're fair catching it every time. And I'll tell you this, last year, I don't know how closely those in Tuscaloosa followed this, LSU special teams were an abject disaster. They muffed 2 punts in the opener against Florida State. They got 2 kicks blocked against Florida State. Again, they lost, obviously, with a blocked extra point. They opened the game against Tennessee, muffing the opening kickoff, which Tennessee recovered like on a pooch kick. They couldn't cover anybody. They were just atrocious. And that caused Brian Kelly to literally let go of the first staffer he hired at LSU after 1 year. Brian Polian was brought in, coach special teams and recruit, and he trusted him implicitly to do that. And the special teams were so bad, he was like, well, we got to move on. And this year they've been really good. They've got a freshman kick returner in Caleb Jackson, who's big and a track guy, explosive, has had a couple of long returns. Damian Ramos has been very good kicking field goals outside of one chip shot he missed against Grambling. I mentioned Bramlett's been fantastic. The one bummer for me from an LSU perspective is that LSU the last 3 years has totally quit on game-changing punt returners. They had the muff issues last year when they started Malik Neighbors back there, and this year Aaron Anderson, and they've just said we're done with that. They've got a walk-on back there. He fair catches it every time. And that's with this offense, that's okay because they go down and score. And in 2019, I'd be okay with that. But I like Patrick Peterson back there. I like Odell Beckham back there. I like guys that can make explosive plays in the return game. Tyrann Mathieu changed some games in 2011 doing that. And LSU's completely given up on that. They're just fair catching everything. So they've been very, very solid on special teams, and Bramlett's been excellent.
Well, we love Jay Bramlett, even if he's wearing purple and gold. And so, hopefully we get from our side, he gets a lot of punts. And one thing I'll notice, LSU hasn't punted more than 3 times in any game. I think they've only punted those 3 times in 2 games, maybe this whole year. So Jay Bramlett not been getting a whole lot of work there this year, but that's A-okay from the Tigers' perspective. Hunt, we've had a lot of fun talking to you so far today. We've been talking to Hunt Palmer, host of the Hunt Palmer Show on ESPN 104.5 from 1 until 3 down in Baton Rouge, and pre- and post-game as well on LSU Sports Radio. Anything that I've missed or any other aspects for the LSU Tigers that the Alabama people who maybe haven't watched them since week 1 and really watched them in the fourth quarter against LSU and Ole Miss because they were waiting on Alabama, Mississippi State to come on TV. Anything that we've left off the table or things that we should be aware of for the Saturday night ball game?
We have not discussed Logan Diggs, LSU's running back, and I don't know whether or not he was not available for the Florida State game. I think he was a little bit hurt and didn't practice enough leading up to it. But LSU could not run the ball on Florida State. They had one run of 41 yards at the end of the first half when Florida State was in kind of like prevent, and they busted one. Outside of that, the running backs had like 12 carries for 13 yards. And Diggs was not involved in that. Since he's come back, he's been really good. He's in the top 3 in the SEC in rushing yards per game. How much of that is because the defenses aren't as good as Florida State? How much is because he's played well and the offensive line's been a little bit better? Again, that's another thing that we'll learn. But he's a talented back. He's not in the mold of the elite backs that LSU's had, the Darius Geis, Leonard Fournette, Jeremy Hill crew. But he's better than the guys they had out there against Florida State. And so I'm curious to see how well LSU runs the ball on Saturday, because if they start running it, like, then that just opens it. Makes things so easy for Jaden, who's been so good. So that'll be interesting to see how well Logan Diggs can get some traction. We know how huge a role Clyde Edwards-Helaire played in that 2019 game where he was fantastic.
Absolutely. On my Twitter this past week, I got a little hell because I said Logan Diggs is going to be the best back that Alabama has faced this year. And people were saying, oh, Quinshon Judkins, Jalen Wright. And they were talking about the Texas running back. And Judkins is great, but he wasn't healthy against Alabama. And then Jalen Wright's okay. I couldn't decide after getting some of those comments, and it's fine. I don't care if anybody disagrees with me. I kind of like rethought myself. And I was like, well, maybe it's the offense as a whole that opens things up and opens things up for Diggs to have lanes. And so that's why I think it's going to be a lot of one-on-one matchups for the Alabama defense. Can you win your box? And golly, I've been impressed with the defense so far this year, but they're facing a whole different animal this weekend.
It'll be the best offense they face, and we'll just have to see.
Do you are you ready to give any predictions yet? Or are you going to save that for your Friday shows? And please don't burn yourself on account of me. But or if you want to wrap it up and give kind of final thoughts on the game, I'd be more than happy to have it.
Yeah, look, I have a lean at this point is towards Alabama. I can't trust LSU's defense right now. There is certainly an avenue where Alabama is clunky on offense and Milton's a little indecisive, and LSU gets a turnover, and the LSU offense gets rolling, and they do what they've done, and they go score a bunch of points. I think it's more likely that Alabama hits some deep plays, controls the clock a little bit and running the ball, and that LSU, because of the crowd noise and the fact that they feel like they've got to score every time down, gets a little bit bogged down maybe in the second half, and I think Alabama gets out of there with a win. I reserve my right to change things on Friday when the vibes you kind of start feeling the game day vibes a little bit, but I can't pick this LSU defense to go on the road right now and win.
Well, Hunt, I really appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. You've really gotten us ready for the ball game this weekend. I know you're going to be on pre and post game for LSU. Tell anybody else or wherever they can find you. The Hunt Palmer Show, 1 to 3 on ESPN 104.5.
Yeah, you can find us on 104.5 here in Baton Rouge, but also we're everywhere you can find your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon, all those places, as well as YouTube, the Hunt Palmer Show as well. So got some individual cut-ups for Alabama fans that want a little LSU perspective, some 10-minute segments and whatnot, all up there at Hunt on LSU on YouTube. So appreciate you having me, Jay.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Have a great show today.
All right, we will try to do it. Enjoy the football on Saturday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's Hunt Palmer joining me on the program today, and I really appreciate his time. He gave us a great 40 minutes of LSU talk, and look, it's going to be a war on Saturday. I know on Monday I was feeling like a big old Alabama win, but as I've watched more LSU and as I've thought more about it, and we've heard from Matt Moscano, we've heard from Hunt Palmer, I'm getting closer to that. Maybe that 3-point line is right about right for Saturday. So what are we going to do the rest of the week? We are going to do Football Friday tomorrow with Kay Wyndham. Austin Hannon told me he's going to be back in the fold. We'll see whoever else from the BamaCentral crew jumps on and joins us on Football Friday. Now, what we are going to do, we're going to be at a NATO's press conference tomorrow at about 11:15 or so. So when we finish with Coach Oates, we're coming back home and we're doing Football Friday. We'll do Football Friday and kind of get you ready for the weekend, make all our SEC picks, talk more about LSU and Alabama. Might have a bonus Saturday episode dropping. I have a phone call scheduled on Friday with a certain 5-star quarterback commit from California. So maybe we can drop that on Saturday before the game and get everybody excited for Julian Sagan's perspective. We'll see about that. That might drop on Saturday as well. So it's going to be a great rest of the week right here on the Joe Gaither Show. I appreciate Hunt Palmer. I appreciate Matt Moscana. We had Jacob Pickle on Tuesday from Blue Collar Unplugged. If you haven't subscribed to Blue Collar Unplugged, you're missing out. The gentleman just dropped another episode this morning. This episode features ESPN's Seth Greenberg. Seth Greenberg gave the guys a lot of insight on the LSU Wake Forest scrimmage, gave them a lot of insight on the transfers that Alabama brought in, the new coaches that Alabama brought in, maybe College Game Day coming to Tuscaloosa. I know we've got our 56th time that College Game Day has featured an Alabama football game, but College Game Day never has been to Coleman Coliseum for basketball. Seth Greenberg is going to talk about that on their episode as well. So check out Blue Collar Unplugged on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. And of course, right there on the cover, on the front page of BamaCentral.com. We are both a proud part of the BamaCentral Broadcasting Network, and we love and appreciate Chris Walsh for putting us on each and every day. I love and appreciate you guys, Wendell Hare and Joe Will. You guys are chiming in on the comments today, and anybody else who wants to jump in and chime in on the comments, you can find me at Joe Gaither 6 on the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, wherever that you do your social medias. It's at Joe Gaither 6. Send me your comments, questions, queries, and complaints. The complaints are my favorite. We can hit me up at Joe Gaither 6. And of course, rate, review, subscribe, find the show, The Joe Gaither Show, on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, at BamaCentral, and on BamaCentral.com.